Chapter 1. I was in my room completing my homework when my mother called me. I bookmarked my maths textbook and walked down the hallway, hearing a conversation in progress. We had visitors, a regular event in our household. I entered the living room and saw my parents on the couch, with a trio I'd never seen before. "This is my daughter Alma." Mum made the introductions in Bosnian. "This is Anisa and her husband Nerman, and Anisa's mother Eneza." "Bože sačuvaj," Anisa said, which meant God forbid. Her mouth formed an O in surprise as she scrutinized my face. "She looks exactly like Sabia." "Who is Sabia?" Mum asked. "Isad's other daughter," Anisa said. "We saw Bara a month ago in Melbourne." I didn't understand what this stranger was saying. My father had another daughter? I looked at my mother for help. "Isad doesn't have another daughter," Mum said. "Yes, he does. Sabia, from his first marriage with Bara. She is the spitting image of her father and sister." Nerman nodded to me. My legs felt weak. My father was married before? I turned to my father, hoping to get confirmation this was all a lie. His face was white. "Alma, return to your room," Mum commanded. I walked down the hall, hiding in the alcove so I could eavesdrop. "How could you not know?" Anisa demanded. "Bara was 4 months pregnant when you moved to Hobart." There was an awkward silence before Mum jumped in. "Bara told him the child wasn't his." "Aren't there tests to find out?" Anisa said. "After all, you both know that she wasn't of sound mind." "Do you have Bara's phone number?" my father asked. "Of course," Nerman said. I heard the ping of a SMS. Nerman must have sent my father the phone number in an SMS. My father passed in front of the hallway and went to his study, closing the door behind him with "Finally." "My apologies. Maybe we should reschedule this visit," Mum said, walking our guests to the front door. I inched down the hallway and closer to the study. Mum closed the front door after our guests and walked to stand in front of the study door to eavesdrop with her back to me. Dad initially spoke in a regular voice and then shouted, "You should have told me she was my daughter." Mum opened the study door. Dad was staring at his phone with a distraught face, tears streaming down his face. "What am I going to do now?" He fell into Mum's arms, his sobbing rending the air. Beep beep. I opened my eyes, staring at the glaring white ceiling before me. I lifted my arm and hit the snooze button, discombobulated that I was reliving the most traumatic day of my life in my dreams again. Even though it had happened 3 months before, I always woke up from this dream with the same feeling of betrayal and shock. I dressed, trying on half a dozen outfits before settling on jeans and a black and white striped stretchy top. My new school had no uniform, and I debated long and hard about what to wear. Mum's advice was black pants and a white shirt. "It's a good idea to be smart casual," she'd said, but I was afraid that was too formal. I went to the bathroom, washing my face and looking at my frightened green eyes in the mirror. I tried to tell myself that everything would be all right, but if I had learnt anything up until this point, it was that things can always get worse. I practiced my smile in the mirror until my cheeks were sore. It was important that it looked careless and natural, a mask that I could hide the quiet terror filling me. I stretched my lips wider and pushed my cheeks deeper into my face. That would have to do. It was the first day of term 3 and I was beginning my third school in year 10. "Alma," my little sister Sanela called out my name as she pounded on the bathroom door. I opened the door and she rushed in like a tornado. She got her hairbrush from the drawer and handed it to me. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and brushed her hair, while Sanela stood between my legs brushing her Barbie's blonde curls, her little 5-year-old hands finding it difficult to manipulate the tie around the doll's ponytail. I looked at the clock. Mum was due home soon from her night shift as a nurse. She usually came home before we had to leave for school. Done. I breathed out a sigh of relief. I still had to do my hair and check my outfit one last time before breakfast. Now do Barbie. Sanayla thrust the doll toward me. I don't have time. I stopped when Sanayla looked at me with pleading brown eyes. It was quicker to tie the doll's hair into a makeshift ponytail than argue. Here. I gave the doll back when I finished. I carefully brushed my blonde hair back, ensuring that it parted directly in the middle, then stood in profile and smoothed down my top. My younger brother Ali appeared in the bathroom doorway and met my eyes in the mirror. He and Sanayla took after Mum with their brown hair, brown eyes and round faces. Dad's waiting. He didn't need to say any more. I knew Dad was tapping his watch, his patience straining. As a doctor, he was used to being the one who set the schedule. Get your backpack, I ordered Sanayla and went to my bedroom to do the same. As we walked down the stairs, I looked through the round window that was at eye level across from me. Through it I could see the street outside, the roofs of the housing estate we lived in, filling the horizon like little matchbox houses. They all looked alike with their square bricked walls, carefully manicured lawns, and precisely placed plants. We'd moved to Melbourne 3 months ago, and I still yearned for our house in Hobart. We'd lived off the beaten track with tall trees hugging our house, cocooning us from the rest of the world. I used to look out the window for hours, my eyes following the leaves as they danced in the wind. Now I averted my gaze from the ugly view that confronted me, and continued down. Dad tried to convince us that the move would be an adventure. He'd given us carte blanche to buy whatever we wanted at furniture shops, after our disastrous attempts in transplanting our old furniture, the delicate wrought iron pieces and white wood furniture that looked so perfect and quaint in our brick cottage but had looked wonky and cheap against the multicolored feature walls. It's no good. Mum had covered her face with her hand. This McMansion defies good taste, she'd said, her tone full of spite. She'd never been enamored with the charms of our new home, but she'd been worn down from leaving her family behind and fallen prey to Dad's enthusiasm for space. Mum had wanted to pack our old furniture in storage, but Dad said we couldn't afford the fees, so we'd sold them at a garage sale. I thought I'd had bad days until then. Among the contenders for the title was the day that I found out about his other daughter, and the day that we moved to Melbourne and I was confronted with the monstrosity that was to be our new home. It's got 4 bedrooms so you don't have to share anymore, he'd sounded like the eager real estate agent when he showed us around the McMansion. But I want to be with Alma. Sanayla grabbed hold of my skirt and tried to burrow into my body. Even though sometimes I had wished for nothing more than my room, there were too many changes too soon. I wanted things to slow down, but life was fast-forwarding at super speed. You're big enough to sleep by yourself, Dad replied to Sanayla offhandedly and continued the tour. But in the end, the winner of the worst day of my life was the day of the garage sale when Dad sold every trace of our former life to strangers for pocket change. As each piece of furniture was sold to an eager bargain hunter, I felt like I was being robbed of a childhood memory. When we hit the bottom of the stairs, the front door burst open and Mum rushed in. Mummy, Sanayla exclaimed with pleasure, holding out her arms. SRCE Moya. Mum picked her up, their dark glossy hair intermingling together as she kissed her, calling Sanayla her heart. Let's go. Dad headed for the front door, briefcase in hand. Our parents insisted we speak only Bosnian in the house, so we maintained our fluency. Mum was much stricter about the rule and ignored us if we spoke English. Sanayla's stomach rumbled. Did you eat breakfast? Mum looked at the clean sink and pushed past Dad. Let's fix that, she said as she rifled through the kitchen cupboards. Sit. Mum pointed to the stool with the wooden spoon she was holding. As I watched Mum expertly flip eggs and put bread in the toaster, my father's burning gaze drilled a hole in the nape of my neck. Usually I was the one who made breakfast when Mum worked, but this morning I'd spent half an hour changing outfits. I'm going to be late, Dad said, still standing by the doorway. Alma, your father will drive you, Mum told me. I coughed as the orange juice I was drinking went down the wrong pipe. I'd avoided being alone with Dad since I was expelled from my last school. And I'll drive Ali and Sanayla, Mum continued. My new high school was in St. Albans near Dad's medical center, while Ali and Sanayla's schools were closer to home in Sydenham. When Mum served breakfast, I gulped the eggs down without chewing, only to stop abruptly and cover my mouth as the gooey texture of the scrambled eggs triggered my gag reflex. Don't rush. Mum shot an annoyed look at Dad. He retreated to the living room. When we finished breakfast, Mum pulled out our lunch bags from the fridge and handed them out. We walked out of the front door and I followed my siblings to Mum's 4WD. Ali got in the back seat and rolled down the window. Come on, Alma. Sanayla tugged me toward the back seat. Alma isn't coming with us, Mum said gently. Daddy will drive her to school today. But who's going to wait with me until school starts? Sanayla was on the verge of tears. Sanayla was in prep and was anxious by herself. I used to stay with her at her primary school until her friends arrived, then undertook the 15-minute walk to my previous school, a private all-girls school. You'll be all right. I knelt in front of her and cupped her cheek. Your new friend Heidi will wait for you at school. Sanayla hugged me, her little arms clinging to my neck. She was born when I was 10 and I reckon I'd nearly changed almost as many of her nappies as Mum had. Let go of your sister now. Mum grabbed hold of Sanayla's arms and gently tugged her away. No, Sanayla shouted, holding tighter. I took a deep breath and blinked back my own tears. You won't be alone. I'll stay with you, Ali said. See. I made my voice upbeat. Ali will stay with you. Sanayla looked uncertainly between Ali and I. Promise, she demanded from our brother. I promise. He took Sanayla's other hand. You'll be fine, Mum said to me with a fake smile stretching her lips, while Ali strapped Sanayla into the booster seat. You'll make lots of friends. As Mum hugged me, I hid my face in her hair, wanting to be a little girl once again and believe in every platitude, but I knew she was just as nervous as I was. I was embarking on a whole new adventure at my first co-ed public high school. Either of those would have terrified me. The two together and I was paralyzed. Don't forget I'll pick you up after school at Dad's work. Mum pecked me on the cheek and briskly got in the driver's seat. I waved as the car reversed out of the driveway. The 4WD was parallel to the house and Sanayla's pressed her face against the glass window when Dad turned on the ignition to his car. I aborted my waving and jumped into the passenger seat. We reached the end of the cul-de-sac and Mum's 4WD turned left, while Dad turned right. I watched through the back window until Mum's car wasn't visible anymore. I looked ahead again, suddenly aware of the silence in the car. The last time I'd been alone with Dad was when I got expelled 3 days ago and he drove me home, his body taut with seething silence. Dad took a right turn and cleared his throat. There's something I need to talk to you about, he said, switching to English. He'd lived in Australia for nearly 20 years and had the faintest tinge of an accent when he spoke. I turned to look at him and clenched my fists. He was going to give me the blasting I'd been waiting for. It was almost a relief after the silent treatment of the past 3 days. I grabbed hold of the car door handle and fantasized about pulling it open, throwing myself out of the moving car and sliding across the asphalt, my skin peeling like a banana. Surely it couldn't be more painful than what was about to take place in the car. It's about your new school. Dad paused. I took a deep breath, realizing I hadn't exhaled since he first spoke. I'm really excited, I lied. I was full of trepidation about what it would be like to go to a public school. The kids in public schools were rough, and I was told that public schools had less discipline. It's got a fantastic academic record. I recited the facts and figures I'd memorized from repeatedly staring at the school enrollment information. It's not that. Dad waved for me to stop. You'll know someone at your new school. Mum told me, I interrupted again. Mum worked the phones after they enrolled me, calling around the Bosnian community until she tracked down a student who went to the same school. Dina Hasanagic. Could you please let me finish? He snapped. I hunched into the passenger seat, his words like a slap to the face. My fingers jumped to my mouth, my teeth connecting with enamel, before I remembered myself and sat on my hands. I'm sorry. Dad put his hand through his hair, messing his carefully combed hair. He was nervous. My stomach clenched harder. Your sister goes to St. Albans High. Dad turned to look at me. No, she doesn't, I automatically replied. Sanayla goes to. I abruptly cut out. He was talking about his other daughter. My body lurched as if our car hit a pothole, but the road before us was smooth as glass. It was the same feeling I'd had when Elle found out about our supposed sister from Dad's first marriage. After my parents made the family announcement about my father's other daughter, everything sped up. Dad went on a trip to meet his firstborn and came back with a job offer and real estate pamphlets in tow. My parents fought over the proposed move. Mum didn't want to leave her extended family, who were all within a 15-minute drive, but in the end it was inevitable. Dad had always wanted to move to Melbourne in order to be more involved with the Bosnian community and have access to greater professional opportunities, and when he found out he had a long-lost daughter, he gained greater familial priority. Before I knew it, we were packing and moving to Melbourne. Dad's attempt to atone for his inadvertent years of neglect were thwarted when Sabia refused to have contact with him. I wanted to ask him if he knew before they enrolled me. I wanted to shout and scream, but years of habit taught me to keep my lips zipped and my eyes on the floor. I know you're probably thinking that I wanted you to enroll at St. Albans High because of Sabia, but that's not true, he said, as if he'd read my mind. It truly is the best school in the area. Dad peeked at me as he drove. I'm sorry. I know this isn't fair to you. If you want to come to work with me, we can find another school for you. It was the last thing I expected to hear. Do you mean it? Of course, Dad said. It's completely your decision. He was tense, his whole body on edge as he waited for my answer. For the first time since we found out about the other daughter, I had his full attention and it was intoxicating. Maybe I shouldn't throw this gift away? Going to St. Albans High might be my chance to bring back the dad I knew, but who'd been missing in action for the past 3 months. What about Mum? I asked. I didn't tell your mother because I didn't want any outside influences to affect your decision, Dad said. Anytime there was a reference to the other daughter, Mum stiffened and went on the defensive. She'd fought against the move and lost, and was furious that Sabia refused to see Dad after our sacrifices. I'll tell your mother tonight. But I was betraying Mum by even contemplating going behind her back. Sabia is a part of my life now and your mother knows that. She'll see that this is the best decision for all of us. Dad smiled. I felt compelled to smile back, even though I didn't agree. There would be hell to pay when Mum found out. Dad stopped the car in front of the school and I looked with concern at the empty schoolyard. We're late, Dad said as he got out of the car. We were supposed to arrive at the office before the bell, see the coordinator, who would introduce me to Dina, whose job was to show me around the school and take me to class. Dad reached into the back seat and got out a gift bag. I got this for your first day. I had a spring in my step as I peered into the bag. He'd bought me a purple organizer, matching pen and water bottle. When we reached reception, Dad gave me a rushed hug and a peck on the cheek. I closed my eyes, inhaling Dad's cologne, and tried to remember the last time he'd held me. It was way back before we moved to Melbourne. "Give your sister a chance," he said before he left. An admin worker walked me to class and introduced me to the teacher, while the students inside the classroom erupted into chatter. "Everyone settle," Ms. Partridge called out as I followed her back into class. "This is our new student Alma Omarovich." Ms. Partridge's forehead wrinkled for a moment, and she looked at the back. "Are you any relation to Sabia?" she asked. Time stopped as I followed Ms. Partridge's gaze and met Sabia's eyes. I felt déjà vu, as if I was looking at myself in a mirror. We both took after Dad and had his blonde hair, dimpled chin and high cheekbones. But the longer I stared, the more the differences became apparent. We had different shaped eyes and mouth. I'd wondered what Sabia looked like, but at home she was a conversational black hole, and I'd had to make do with my imagination. My fantasy revolved around Dad realizing he'd made a mistake and casting off his fake daughter. Our lives would return to normal and we'd go home to Hobart. There were so many times I wanted to ask Dad if he got a DNA test. How could he be sure? But the questions burnt in my throat, never to pass my lips. Now I knew why he was so determined to establish a relationship with her. There was no mistaking that she was her father's daughter. "No," Sabia spat out, breaking the spell. "We're not related." I had to fight not to run for the door. She looked at me with such anger and disgust, I was scared she'd vaporize me with the scorn shooting from her eyeballs. "You can sit next to Dina," Ms. Partridge continued, oblivious to the tension in the air. Sabia stood and collected her things, her resentment obvious as she slammed her notebook and slapped her pencil case together. She looked like a girl lumberjack. She had on a denim mini and pink leggings, and her feet encased in chunky worker boots. Her outfit should have looked all wrong, instead she looked cool and fierce. I was frumpy in my 2 new jeans and bland top, and couldn't wait to hide behind the desk. "Sabia, quiet." The teacher shushed. Sabia moved to an empty desk in the last row. The 2 boys in front of her turned around and whispered to her, but she shook her head. I slid into the seat next to Dina. "Hi," I whispered, trying to make eye contact, but Dina snubbed me. I stared at the teacher stiffly, trying to focus on To Kill a Mockingbird, but it was no good. I felt Sabia's stare like ants walking on my neck. Abruptly I turned to look behind me, catching Sabia off guard. I'd expected her to still be staring at me with rage. Instead she looked miserable. I remembered how Dad had implored me to give Sabia a chance, as if I was his last hope. Sabia had determinedly rebuffed his every attempt to establish contact. In the end, their relationship was reduced to him paying weekly child support, a too generous amount that we could barely afford, according to Mum. After English double period, the recess bell rang, and I turned to catch Sabia madly packing her things to make a dash for the door. "Can we talk?" I followed her. "About what?" Sabia whirled around. "How your mother is a home wrecker?" "No," I stuttered to a stop, my train of thought evaporating. "My mum isn't." "Then how do you explain the fact that we're the same age?" Sabia snapped, turning around again.